Hi, welcome to the webinar today. My name is Heidi Schrader. I'm the Senior Business Consultant for Lasso and our sales and marketing products here at ECI, and I'm going to be your host for today. In my role here with the residential home construction division at ECI, I help builders better understand how to manage their salespeople, their processes, and their prospects within Lasso in particular, but also some of our other sales and marketing products. So just a couple of logistics before we get started. This webinar is People Over Process, the hidden sales killer you didn't see coming. So it's going to be presented by Ryan Taft of Impact 88. We'll introduce him here in just a moment, but I wanted to go through just a couple of logistics. Everyone will be muted today for the call, but if you have any questions, I'm going to be monitoring that question box. And we love engagement and we love questions, so pop them in there and I'll be monitoring that, and we can ask those as they come up. This session will be recorded today, so after the webinar, we'll send you a follow-up email you can share with your friends and colleagues. And then if you have any issues or problems, pop it in the question or the chat, and I'll see how I can help you to make you sure that you can get everything set up. So as we're waiting for people to trickle in, I'm going to give just a little bit of background on ECI. I know most of you know what we do here, but we provide software solutions across 5 different industries, residential home construction being one of those. And we now have 11 different integrated software solutions to serve builders. It covers all aspects of building, including sales and marketing, customer experience, design, operations, warranty, accounting, you name it, we have it. So one of our main goals here is to really help small and medium-sized businesses compete and grow. One of the ways we do this is by offering these webinars and sharing industry knowledge with you. So there's no one better with industry knowledge, I don't think, than Ryan Taft with Impact 88. And he is here to present People Over Process, the hidden sales killer you didn't see coming. Ryan, take it away, and I'll stick around here to chat with you too.
Oh yeah, you're a part of this. You're not getting away.
Okay, I'm not going anywhere.
No, I love the fact that you and I have these great conversations. For those of you that are just tuning in, Heidi and I have been just chatting it up for the last almost 20 minutes. We probably should have recorded that because that was good stuff.
We maybe should have recorded that.
Yeah, that maybe we do that next time. Now, the last time I saw you was just recently, gosh, at the Builder Show.
At the Builder Show, short time ago, but it seems like forever ago.
It does. It goes by really fast. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I'm stoked that we get to do this. And, we're going to get into talking a little bit about something that I have observed over, gosh, I've been in the industry since 2001, so my 24th year doing this. And I've trained all over the country. I've talked to pretty much every size home builder, everything from one-on-one coaching to keynotes to talking to thousands of people, and I just have a few observations, and so I'll get into this a little bit, and then I'm sure you'll probably have some thoughts or comments here too, Heidi. So I don't want this to be the Ryan show. Like, I'd love to have you chime in, but I just have this, I don't know, this it's been on my mind for a while, where you have training, and look, I've been through every training under the sun. I probably received a master's degree in the dark arts of manipulation from old school training that taught you to get people to say yes multiple times, and how to use tie downs and all this garbage, frankly. And through all of it, there's something that just seems to stick out to me, and it's the thought of if anyone who's listening has ever been in one of my sessions ever in the last 20 years, you probably have heard me say this phrase: what you focus on gets magnified. Now, that's not a concept that I've developed. It's actually in Proverbs, right? Like, what you focus on gets magnified. It's kind of like when you buy a new car, you start to see that car everywhere. Well, here's the challenge.
Yes.
And look, Heidi, I've been guilty of this, right? As a trainer, what do you need to do? You need to convince companies that your sales process that you're selling is the one that they need. And I get it, and I totally get it, and it makes sense, and it's true. And that's what people are arguably looking for, is a sales process, something that will increase revenue, something that that's trackable, you can hold people accountable to it. But over the last 24 years, here's the problem that I've noticed, is if it's true what you focus on gets magnified, well then, what are we getting people to focus on? The sales process, right? So stick with me here.
Right.
Here's why I think this is a challenge, Heidi, is because when you focus too much on the process, that becomes the primary focus. Well, then what becomes the secondary focus or the third area focus? I don't know if that's a word. Any guess?
The third area of focus, right? The people.
The people. So how is it
Right.
that we can?
Right.
How is it that we can have a video shop? You ever, and you've seen video shops, right? Like we've all seen video shops. We've been in them.
Yeah.
We've seen them. I've watched over 1,000 video shops in my time. Have you ever seen a video shop where the score was like 98 to 100? Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't. Maybe you have.
Right. Oh, yeah. Fair enough. I've seen them where they're 98 to 100. Right. We've got the score was amazing, and we're sitting there in as managers going, "Oh my gosh, it's the best shop. They got 100 points, and we celebrate 100 points." But if you go and watch the shop, I've seen it. It's not all the time, but I've seen it where it's like, this person couldn't sell themselves out of a paper bag. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean something was missing, even though they got a good score. If you guys are on the chat box, I don't know if we can get chat interaction here, but if you have seen this, if you're listening right now and you've seen that before, put a oh yeah in the chat box, or just chime in on this, because to me, on the flip side, and I'm probably gonna upset some people here on this one, I've seen it the other way. I've seen it where like the person's score kind of sucked, but boy, they had good curiosity, and they were connecting with the person. They maybe didn't hit all the steps perfectly, but they had some of those softer skills. Is that making sense, Heidi?
It's making sense, because I think I'm that second person, or I have been in the past for sure, that, maybe I don't do the process perfectly, but, we aim for that magic bullet sometimes, right?
Sure.
We aim for that magic bullet as far as, we want to do this process perfectly, but it prevents us from showing personality and that we're human, right?
Oh, this is exactly where I'm going with this. Yeah, you can be robotic and you can hit all the points, and it feels more like you're checking the box than it is like you're actually connecting with the person. And so one of the mantras that we're using at Impact 88 is people over process. In other words, what I mean by that is that we want our clients to put the people as the primary focus and the process as the secondary focus. Here's why. Let me give you an example of this. And I'm gonna put you on the spot here, Heidi. You're gonna play with me on this one. So let's say that, and you and I have known each other for a few years, right? Yeah, don't worry, nothing tough. Well, you and I have known each other for a few years. So let's say that that you and I are gonna go grab a coffee. Okay, we're gonna go get a coffee, and we're meeting at the local coffee shop, whatever it may be. And you get there first. And by the way, you have pre-ordered me a coffee, which, by the way, thank you for that. That was very nice of you. And let's say I come walking into the coffee shop. Yes. You're so kind. But I come walking in, and I walk in like this, and I want your honest reaction to this. If I walked in like this. Hey. What would you ask me?
So glad that you could take the time to meet with me, because it doesn't look like you're super thrilled to be here.
Right. Something's wrong. You can see it. You instantly pick up something's off. And if we have a little bit of relationship, you're probably like, what's up with you? Right? And you're like, hey, what's up? What's up with you? And if I said to you as a friend, if I said, oh, Melissa and I might have to move. My suspicion is, and any normal human being would not say, Well, what size home are you looking for? Are you working with a realtor? Do you have a home to sell? Like, you wouldn't do that. In fact, if
Right.
you did that, I would probably never, ever have lunch with you again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay.
And that's okay. But
I think I know what I would do.
what would you do if I was like, oh, Melissa and I might have to move? What would you say?
I would show some empathy.
Oh, holy moly. Sorry. What?
Empathy.
Yeah. You'd
The
show
magic
some
word.
empathy. You'd show some empathy. And then my suspicion is you'd probably say something like, why? What's going on? Are you okay? What's happening?
Yeah.
Here's what you don't do. You don't think to yourself, what's my next question? What's my process? Am I doing it right? That's not what you would do at all. But when you focus too much on process, when we as sales leaders focus on the process, we lose the focus on the human being. You see, I do this example all the time. I did it just recently. I was in front of a group of people in a session, and in fact, I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, at their HBA out there, which I know you're very familiar with. And I picked a random person in the audience, and I did exactly this. I said, if I just sat down and said this to you, what would you say? And she was like clearly newer into the industry or whatever it was, and she said, what's going on? Are you all right? And I was like, look at that. No training, no script, no practice, no process, just genuine interest and care about the other person. And that is people over process. Now, why this is arguably the hidden sales killer is because you could sit there and say, our team is firing on all cylinders, they're nailing the process, but I am convinced that is not what sells homes by itself. In fact, I can prove it. I want to actually do a TV show on this, so if anyone has any connections in the TV world, call me. My wife is probably the most curious person on the planet. If you meet her, she's going to know everything about you. I have a rule called the 7-floor rule, meaning if you're on a elevator with my wife and you're going 7 floors or more, at the end of that elevator ride, there's some sort of exchange of information. There's a hug, someone's crying, something's going on, no doubt about it. Yeah. Now, my wife is the most unprocessed person you'll also ever meet. So she's high on people, low on process. I want to do a TV show where I throw her into different sales environments with different types of products and film how she basically just destroys every other salesperson. That's how much I'm willing to bet on the people over process, is because I've seen it. She can do it. So when we're thinking of how we're training our teams, and we're thinking of how are we actually like showing up as companies, what's our brand? I would argue that care and concern, and you said it a minute ago, empathy, and then arguably curiosity should be highly baked into that customer experience, because there's a quote, you've probably read it, I'm not sure if our audience has or not, but there's an old classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's one of my favorites, right?
I have read it. Yes.
Yes, right. Good old Dale Carnegie.
Yes.
He says in that book a quote that I love, and it's this quote. He says, in order to be interesting, which I think is what everybody's really after, you first have to be interested. There's an order to it.
That's why that book is, when was it written? The 70s, and it's still
not the 70s.
Still relevant. You can find it.
Hang on. This is that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Look at this. This is a 1937 edition. 1937.
No way.
1937.
1937. I didn't realize. I knew that I had read it in college, ages and ages and decades ago.
Well, here, look. Inside the book was a script for salt tablets from some RX, and so you can see where it has the date. It says 1903 on it.
Okay, that's really cool. That's really cool that you have it. So, that just goes to show that quote, that it's evergreen. It lasts forever. That's something that, is a foundational part of selling, right?
It's a foundational part of relationships, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's one of the human needs. If you look at COVID, if you go back to COVID, whereas everyone distance yourselves, distance, right, stay away, sit, and nobody was allowed to connect. Well, people lost their minds, right? Why? Because getting attention and connection and that fellowship with other people is such a high need in the human experience that in absence of it, Carnegie talks about this, that people will literally go insane, create an alternate personality to talk to themselves because they're not getting that attention and connection. Heck, half the audience that's listening right now talk to themselves either in the car or while they were getting ready this morning, right? So, yeah.
Guilty of that. My shower talk. Totally guilty.
But it's true. So here's the other piece of this. When everyone else is so focused on their process, which is one-sided, did I do it right? Did I say the right thing? Did I follow the steps? The company or the teams that reverse that order will ultimately provide a better customer experience and increase their revenue as a result of it, not as the point of it.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. That makes sense to me.
So that's really where I'm going with this. So yes, we want to have a sales process. I'm not saying don't have a sales process. I'm a freaking trainer. That makes sense to me. But don't so over focus it that you've got a bunch of people running around scared they didn't check the right box. And that's what I'm seeing.
So Ryan, how do you teach this? How do you teach someone to be empathetic and to questions, to be curious?
Well, you first have to ask the question, can it be taught? That's the first thing. Because if you don't believe it can be taught or learned, then you're sort of at a non-starter, right?
Right.
The answer is yes, it can be taught. So I did a little bit of research. I was writing the book Story Getter, and I was researching the topic of curiosity because I'm fascinated by it. Anyone who's ever read the book, I was given the gift of curiosity from my mother, who was a massive alcoholic. And when I was 6 years old, I found her in our bathroom at 3 o'clock in the morning, having tried to commit suicide. Right? So I found her. I was the one who found her.
Rough.
And yeah, rough, but tremendously. What's the right word here? It was a tremendous gift to me, actually, believe it or not. And I say that because it caused me to keep curiosity in the back of my mind, specifically around human behavior and the psychology behind why people do what they do, and the science and the neuroscience. Like, there's things that are going on with people that trigger them, and that's always been fascinating, and that has played very well into what I do for a living. So,
sure.
So that being the case, what with that thought of my mom in researching the book, I wanted to know if curiosity was something that you're just born with, like you have it or you don't. Like, was that the case? And so I had my suspicions, but I like validation through studies and science and all this. So here's what I found. There's a doctor out of the UK named Dr. Sam Wass, and he does. He's a neuroscientist and he's also a child psychologist. Real slacker kind of guy.
Writing it down.
Yeah, Dr. Sam Wass. It's WAAS, if I remember correctly. Anyway, he did a study on curiosity in children, and he came to a couple conclusions. I'll just give you the high level. Here's the first thing he said. He said that every creature on the planet is born with one type of curiosity, because there's ultimately two. And this was actually coined by another PhD who wrote a book called Cracking the Curiosity Code. Diane Hamilton, I believe is her name. And she called it trait curiosity. So Sam Wass and her were on the same page. So trait curiosity you're born with, right? If you've ever been a little kid, you can probably recall asking why. I mean, I asked my brother that question so many times. One time he said, if you ask why one more time, I'm beating the crap out of you. And I paused and I looked at him and I said, how come? Right? I was still curious, right? But in Dr. Wass's studies, he showed that the average child asks an average, get this, of 73 questions per day. That adds up. If you've got little kids, you're like, yeah, pretty much. And some of you are like, I have an above average kid, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, I have kids. I have
Okay.
older kids, but
Okay. So, well, you'll relate to this second part because this is the other thing Dr. Wass said. He said that curiosity dissipates,
yeah,
and Dr. Wass calls this teenagers.
I
Right?
have one of those, and yes.
How old? How old?
I have 19 and a 16.
Okay, cool, perfect. So you'll be able to validate this for the audience. Is that when they get to the teenage years, they don't ask 73 questions a day. They ask 3. What's for dinner? Can I
Mhm.
borrow the car? And can I have money?
100, spot on.
Right. There you go.
That's it. Any other
So
engagement we have to drag out of them.
you have to drag it out of them. I mean, it's like an interrogation, right? Well, to that point, then, that curiosity piece, once it dissipates, we just sort of stop being curious. And you'll see this in everyday communication. People will throw out these little, I call them hooks, like to see, are you actually interested in what I'm saying, or are you just going to blow me off and be surface level? Well, most people blow people off and they're surface level because they're not paying attention. And what's not helping is these things. It's not
Oh,
helping.
no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt. You were telling me that after the builder or during the builder show and a little bit after, you kind of kept off social media. I think that's just a good idea, right? Because
It was,
everyone's just like, I mean, this is my impersonation of everyone on social media. Like that's all they're doing.
it feels like that sometimes, for sure.
It does. Well, so the question you asked is, can it be taught? Yes, yes, empathy and curiosity, but you have to practice it. So Dr. Wass said that yes, you can. Diane Hamilton called it state curiosity. So there was trait and then there was state. State curiosity is where you choose to be in the state of being curious, but you have to practice it. You don't just turn it back on. You have to work at it. It means you have to actually listen and look for those little things that cause you to go, wait, maybe I should ask about that. If you say to your spouse, so how was work today? And they say, it was okay. That's an invitation for you to be curious,
Yes.
right? That's a practice point. So yes, empathy, if you study any of the stuff on empathy, empathy is it comes from seeing things through other people's view, standing in their shoes, but it doesn't mean you have to have the same experiences. It means you have to have had the same emotion they have. So maybe you didn't go through the exact scenario, but if the ultimate scenario was the feeling of loss, the question is, have you ever felt lost before? Well, you can have empathy for that. So
Right.
you just have to be aware of it and then put yourself in that state. That's a whole nother talk, but yeah, absolutely, you can learn it. So long answer to a short question.
I've never heard it posed like that, that empathy is we can relate to the feeling rather than the actual situation.
Yeah.
But I think of myself as a very empathetic person, and I can see that that's probably the case. I've never had massive losses in family, but I can empathize with those people that do have, or maybe that's sympathy. I'm not sure. But
Well, Brene Brown calls it feeling with people.
right.
As empathy. That's how she defines it.
Blessing
But
and a curse. So, what have you seen in the field that kind of led you to this information, that led you to this? I think that you touched on it a little bit on some of the things that you'd seen with shops, but what other types of things have you seen that led you to this conclusion?
well, part of it is just the brain strain of trying to remember all the steps that go along with different sales processes.
Yeah.
I mean, I can go back to the critical path. I can go back to, some of these places had like, well, there's one builder who had 100-point checklist.
Oof. I see that
Exactly.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if anybody who's listening right now used to have to deal with that, if you need to take a moment and go get a bucket and throw up, feel free, right? Because that's ridiculous. And the more over processed you are, that's a problem. So what do I see in the field is I see people not doing the process unless they think they're being shopped. That's what I see. I see people wanting to be human beings, but I feel like there's this pressure to do it in a way that feels inhumane. And again, say things we would never say. So one of the things that I think is changed from the buyer perspective is buyers, and I think this is more and more true each and every day. It just is. and you think about your own shopping habits, I think buyers are really looking for authenticity. I just think they're looking for somebody who's not faking it. Somebody, I was talking to somebody just a couple days ago, a guy's 23, 24 years old, and he's like, well, I just feel like I don't have the credibility. You know, I'm young. I haven't been through the experience. I don't own my own home. I'm like, that's fine. He's like, well, I'm just trying to be professional. I'm like, don't. We know you're not old. It's obvious. Like, don't fake it till you make it. I think
That's
that is
okay.
terrible. I said, you make up for what you're lacking in wisdom, in your excitement, in your enthusiasm. Let's lean into that, because that you have. Anything else is inauthentic. And if I'm a buyer and I hear you drop some scripted line on me that I know, like you can tell, I can tell when you're saying things that
Yeah.
you don't actually say in your real life. It's obvious to me. Like, I'll say things to people. I speak in movie quotes quite a bit. You know, I grew up in LA. My dad was an actor, so I often speak in movie quotes. I'll say things like, "Oh, you're killing me, Smalls," right? Uh, Gen Z, Google that one. But you know, these are this
I don't
is
have
that's
to.
you don't know that one? You don't know that
Oh, no,
movie?
I don't have to Google that one. I know that one.
Oh, okay. We are about to end the webinar, folks. I was about to send
I
Heidi
know a
to go
lot of
watch.
movie quotes. I think we're about the same age.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. So the authentic voice, I think, is really real. But again, what am I supposed to do in the sales office is like, well, let's take the sale out of it. Because here's the thing, and this is the biggest problem that I see. Have you ever ran into a salesperson who was completely like off their game, and they were like 4 weeks, 5 weeks without a sale, and they just had a cancellation, and they're really stressing out about it, and their manager's calling them, and they're just like, I got to make a sale, and it's like a junkie. You ever seen this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. You can feel it, right?
you can feel it. Do you know what's not going to happen with that salesperson?
They're not going to make a sale anytime
That's
soon.
exactly correct. You got it.
Right. You can
Heidi, it reminds me of when I was like 19, 20 years old, and I was like, I need to like find a girlfriend. like I was not the best dater in the world, but I remember being like, I gotta find a date. I arguably probably leaned a little bit into that desperate category, right? Well, do you know what did not work for me was desperate dating. People don't want to date desperate. There's a stench to that, right? But the minute I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm fine being single. I don't need it. All of a sudden it was like, oh, it
Yeah.
just,
Yes.
sales is the exact same way. I had this exact conversation with a salesperson here in the Phoenix market, Glenda, who unfortunately passed away during COVID. It was a sad story, but Glenda was just this light. She had this smile and this energy. And she calls me one day, and this is her opening sentence to me. She says, Ryan, I'm no good to anybody in the sales office right now. Now, my first thought was like, well, that's pretty brutal. She's being really rough on herself. And so my response was, well, you're probably right.
Oh,
I don't think she was expecting me to say that.
but if she felt that way, then
Well,
it comes across, right? We
bingo.
feel that.
And I asked her, I said, what makes you say that? Excuse me. And she says, well, I'm 5 weeks without a sale. I feel like I'm going to get fired, and I just can't get anybody to move. I can't get them to do what I want them to do. And I said, let me share with you how to make a relationship fail. And she said, what's that? And I said, try controlling the other person. We will run from that as fast as we can. Control. I've never met anybody that I knew that was single that was like, Ryan, if you ever meet me, someone who's like a really like gaslighting, abusive controller person, sign me up. Like, never.
This is like dating advice and sales advice. It's the
Hey, we
same
got it
thing.
all. We
It's
got
the same
Impact 88, baby. We'll solve your life problems and your sales problems too.
But it is the same thing. We're dating them. We're courting, as a salesperson, we're courting the prospect, right? It aligns.
There's a lot of through line to that, sure. Yeah, but the opposite then is true, right? Is that if you give people their voice and you don't try to control them and you collaborate instead, well, guess what happens? They don't run away from you. Guess what? They run towards you.
Right.
And that is what I told her. And her manager, Jen, probably would have killed me if she heard me tell her salesperson this. But I said, here's what I think you should do. Stop trying to sell homes.
Just talk to people.
She was like, what is this blasphemy? And I said, listen, obviously that is not working for you. So why don't you get back to the people and stop worrying about the result? Oh, she said, how do I do that? I said, are you joking? Do you know what your gift is? And I asked her this because at this point, I don't know if she knew. I said, do you know what your gift is? And Glenda said no. And anybody who's listening to this, if they know this salesperson, they'll know that this statement's true. Glenda's gift is that when she walked into a room, I'm getting the goosebumps telling this because I just miss her, but Glenda lit up the room. She just was full of joy. And I said, why don't you just do that? Forget the sale. Forget if you make a sale, because that's you focusing on you and it's not about you. I said, why don't you just bring joy to people? If they're not smiling, get them to smile. If they're not laughing, get them to laugh. Just have them leave feeling better than when they came to see you in the first place. And instantly, Heidi, here's what she told me. She goes, oh, I can do that. And right there, I knew she was going to be okay, because her focus came off of her process, off of her result, and back to the people.
Where she was memorable to everyone that she worked, she worked with.
Guess what happened the next week? Guess what happened the next week?
I'm going to say 3 sales.
4.
You
were pretty close, but it was just like me in the dating scenario, right? People don't buy from desperate, and they don't buy from people that are overly processed, that are inauthentic, that are robotic, that are like, what's my next step? And how do, we have these stickers. I wish I had one here. I don't think I have one, but we have these stickers at our company that say, don't be a weirdo.
Oh, I have one on my water bottle, but I don't have my water bottle with me.
Oh, I did. I gave you one. I forgot I gave you one. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's somewhere around.
I am a little bit of a weirdo, but in a good way. So
okay, look, truth be told, I get that because I can imitate crying like a baby perfectly.
Oof.
Perfectly. And that makes me a bit of a weirdo. But when I'm saying don't be a weirdo, I mean don't sound like a weirdo to your buyer by being inauthentic, scripted, overly process driven, and saying things that only weird salespeople with commission breath would say.
And a lot of those scripts have that. How many bedrooms are you looking for? A lot of those scripts that I see anyway, they have that commission breath type. And I'm not just scripts, but processes have that commission. It's built in.
It is. I have a theory about this, and and this is my own experience. I started out in telemarketing when I was in my late teens, and I was handed multiple scripts. I mean, we were a firm that was a for-hire firm, so we sold multiple different products for companies that didn't have the staff or the infrastructure to telemarket, right? So one minute I could be selling countrywide roadside assistance, or in the next minute I'm selling some program for JCPenney, and then US West the next minute, right? We were all over the map. And I was the guy with a 100-foot phone cord, and I had long dyed black hair and earrings. It was terrible, but I loved it.
That is sales by fire.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about learning how to sell? Go be a telemarketer. You'll or get into network marketing, which I did both. So there you go. But yeah, you're right about that. Is every script I've ever read, and this is my opinion, I'm not saying I've read every script, but everyone I've ever been handed, here's been my thought about them. Has the person who wrote this ever sold anything? That's my first thought, because what on earth is this? And then they say things like, you'd agree, wouldn't you? And I'm like, if I said that, I might get throat punched, right? Like, especially nowadays. Maybe if you go back to like 1999, okay, knock yourselves out when you get your double guns as you say it. But don't be a weirdo. That's not how people communicate, and if that's not how you talk. I'll give you an example of this as far as authenticity. So I coached a kid out of Southern California named Steven. And Steven, it was his very first training that I was in, and we were doing some field training. We were out in model homes, and we were working on technique, and I don't even remember what the topic was. All I remember is I walk in to Steven, and he's standing there, and he's talking to his practice partner, and here's how he's standing. And I'm over here like, I walk in and I go, what are you doing? He goes, what do you mean? And I go, why are you standing like that?
Don't be a weirdo.
Yeah, well, yeah. He says, I'm trying to look professional. I go, you look like a weirdo. True story. He was shocked. And I said, this was the key. I said, who's your best friend? And he says, oh, that's easy, Oscar. I said, fabulous. what would you look like and how would you sound doing this if you were talking to Oscar? And immediately, Heidi, he just sort of leaned on something. He goes, well, I'd probably tell him, I go, do that. That's it. That's you. We found him, ladies and gentlemen. We found Steven. Here he is.
So it's also that presence that you have, not just what you're saying, but that presence that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you another example of this. My buddy Derek out in Southern California. Derek's a cool dude. He's known as the new home guy, I think, on Instagram now. But Derek Cruz. So Derek's the kind of guy you want to like hang out with, right? Just cool cat, really, really just like, you're like, oh, this guy's like awesome. And we go to do this training, and there's this moment where Derek turns into a total weirdo. And why? Because he was focusing too much on his process and not enough on the person. And so this is what would happen. He'd get to the moment to ask for the sale, all casual and cool, and then that moment comes up and he goes, oh, I got to do it in a certain way, and his body language all stiffens up, and he puts his hands out like this and he goes, so are you ready to take this home off the market? And I'm like, what are you doing with your hands? And he's like, I don't know. And now he looks like Will Ferrell. I don't know what to do with my hands. Like,
I don't know.
oh, it's hysterical. And I was like,
strangling them.
Yeah, and his partner's like, yeah, you do that. And he's like, I do. And so I said, why don't we work on how to just get back to you being a normal human being and forget the process? And so we literally were like, here's how I had to teach it to him. I said, I want you to imagine that you're at a restaurant and it's a self-serve soda situation, and you've got an empty cup. You're going to get a refill on your soda, and the person you're with has an empty cup, and you're just being nice, saying, hey, I'm going to get a refill. You want one? I said, just show me what that would look like. What would your tone, what would your body language look like? And sure enough, it was just casual, cool. He goes, hey, I'm going to get a refill. You want one? I said, that's how I want you to ask for the sale. And then I had to get him to start leaning on something, right? So like we had him lean up against a wall actually and put his hands in his pocket. Everything you're told not to do, right? But it just felt right. It was just him.
That who's telling us not to do? I mean,
right.
That was a can of worms, but
they,
right?
They say don't do that. I'm like, is that how you talk? How would you talk to a person that you actually cared about? And so he leaned up against something and he put his hands kind of halfway in his pocket. He goes, all right, well, I feel like we've nailed it. You want to write it up? And I was like, do it again. And he did it again and again and again and again. And I had him repeat that casual sink into that to where he was acting like a human being and not so focused on his stinking process. Guess what happened with him the next week?
3, 4, 2, 5. Oh, killing it. So it worked.
It worked. It worked. And I am absolutely convinced of this. Now, I'm going to get some haters on this for sure, because, companies spend bajillions of dollars on their process. I'm just too old to care at this point, right? I'm just going to be a truth teller. Like, look, if you're so focused on your process and you're not focused on the people, you're going to get great shop scores, but you're going to be missing sales. Period. End of story. You're missing sales.
What's the point of the shop scores if that's the point?
That's a good question. We maybe could do a whole nother thing on that, but I will say this around the shop scores. Shop scores, they have their place, right? There is a measurement in there.
I agree that they have their place.
They have a place. They might give you an indicator, but when I'm watching shops, when I'm working with teams, if you've got 12, 15, 20 people on your team and you're ordering shops for all of them, I would venture a guess to say most of the sales leaders aren't really watching all of the shops. They're looking at the scores and the summaries going, okay, we got it. We're good. We're over 85, the C-suite's off my back. We can, right. And I'm not saying that's true for everybody. I've just worked in that environment where it's just too much. So here's what I would tell people. Maybe you don't need to watch the whole shop. I don't know what your schedule looks like, but here's what I would do. When I watch a video shop, I watch the first 5 minutes 3 times in a row. The first time I watch it, what I do is I hit the mute button and I just watch the nonverbals of the salesperson. It's the first thing I do. Do they look like they're comfortable? Do they look natural? Do they look like themselves? Or are they looking like a weirdo? Right?
Yeah.
Are they doing stuff like that? Yeah, exactly. We're going to be an opera singer. I'm not sure.
Sound of Music.
Sound of Music. That's so funny. Someone just said the same thing when I did this a couple days ago. And then the other piece of that with with that is I'll rewind it. By the way, Gen Z, that's a Gen X term. We just started over. I rewind it. I play it again, but I turn the volume up now and I don't look at it. So now I'm, instead of just looking at the body language, now I'm listening to vocal quality. Am I hearing authenticity? Am I hearing curiosity? Am I hearing comfortability? Am I hearing a friendly tone? What am I hearing? And these are things you can't get by looking at a shop score.
Right, right.
These are the soft skills. These are the human skills, right? And then the last piece of the puzzle is then I rewind it and I play it and I watch it all put together now to see what the full package looks like. So I like to isolate the communication pieces to see. And look, I've watched enough shops that if I watch the first 5 minutes, I can probably tell you how the rest of it's going to
go. You can tell right off the bat.
Pretty much. I mean, I'm not saying don't watch the whole shop. I'm just saying at least watch the first 5 minutes, please.
You've seen enough that you're so well versed in these that you can tell pretty much how it's going to go. You
can kind of predict it. There's patterns to all of it for sure. But I can tell, are we process driven or are we people driven? Which one are we?
How did it go? We do have a question. Yay.
Oh, what is it?
Susan, or a comment. Susan actually had two really good comments that she put. She said, doubt in self becomes an overriding energy that repels customers. She followed that with, in my opinion. Well, that's my opinion too.
She's spot on. She's right. So let's put that out of sales and let's put that into another arena. You're getting on an airplane and the captain gets on the overhead, doors closed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Ferguson, American Airlines Flight 3231. We're going to be heading over to Orange County. And if you're someone of prayer, now's the time because I'm just not sure. Doubt causes fear. Your doubt, like there's people I want to have certainty in what they're doing. My pilot is for certain one of them. I did 200 days on the road last year. The other person I want to have certainty is my doctor, my lawyer, and the person handling the biggest transaction of my life, buying a new home for sure. So if you have doubt, and this is probably, Heidi, one of the things I do the most coaching on is people's mindsets, because I don't care if you've been doing this for 1 year or 30 years, you cannot escape the human condition. But here's the answer. It's like any anonymous program. What do? Get your focus off of you, because whether it's self-pity, self-doubt, or alcoholism, it's all about you. What do? They have you go serve somebody else. You pour your attention on others. And when you do that, everything starts to change because it's not about you.
Your confidence aligns.
Well, and because again, when you have self-doubt, it's in the word self.
Right.
I mean, there's your problem. The problem is right there. Right. I need to say, and you'll hear it in the vocal, right? You'll hear it. I need to make a sale. Man, I'm going to get fired. I really need to make something happen here. And the word I, and I'm over here like, ooh, that's not how this should go. So if that's you and you're listening to this right now, because I know like the spring selling season has not happened like we wanted it to, right? Like everyone's like, all right, Super Bowl's over, let's go. And the market was like, pause. It has not taken off the way that we wanted it to yet, but that also has been what I've been talking about for years. Like, don't hope the market feeds this to you. You got to go get busy and get after it, but don't focus on the results, focus on the behavior.
I love that. Susan had a follow-up to that actually, aligns really well with that, this was her question. But wouldn't you say that salespeople that do not know the process or a process and haven't worked to ingrain the process cannot create that confidence and authenticity?
Yeah. So
there's balance with that. Yeah.
Well, there's not an absence of process. It's not don't have any freaking process. That's not the answer. What I'm saying is don't make the process your God.
Yeah.
Don't make that the massive major focus, because then what you have is a bunch of people that can check boxes and they don't have any people skills. What I'm saying is have your process, but prioritize the people behind it. That's the hidden secret. That's why I call the sales process a killers, because look, and I get it, trainers, we need to sell the process. That's what we sell. That our job is to convince you that our process is better than anybody else's and all this stuff, whatever. But the reality is this, like I said, I would put my wife up against anybody and she'd probably win. Right? Because if I had to choose one, I would choose the people, not the process. Now, to have both is really cool because now you know where you're going, you know what you're going to be doing, so much that you forget that there's a process and you're just into the people.
I think that comes more from knowledge too, being confident in your knowledge, maybe not necessarily a script that you have or
Right.
something like that, not memorizing scripts, but being confident in your own knowledge of the product, of people and how you react to certain situations, and just having that self-awareness and understanding what you're selling a little bit gives you that confidence and authenticity.
100%. Again, let me give you an example of process gone wrong. So if you subscribe to the process of feature benefit selling, well, I can tell you that there are people that, because here's what happens: a feature benefit salesperson, and again, I'm gonna upset some folks with this one. Feature benefit salespeople tend to overtalk because I need to tell you about this feature. I need to tell. In fact, we used to have an acronym for this. It was called FBE, which stands for Feature Benefit Emotion. And then you were supposed. So the way it worked is I would tell you about a feature. I would explain all of the benefits you'd get from it. I would assign the emotion you would have from that once you had that feature, and then I would use a tie down to make you agree with me. Let me just throw this out at you. Try that on your spouse and see how quickly you get throat punched. It's not going to go well.
It's not going to go well.
So that's a process that when we are so tied to our process that we're not paying attention, that the people don't want to hear all that. People have this this fun. I play a game in my classes where I say, complete this phrase or complete this sentence. And of course, one of them is, of course, you're good at sales. You have the gift of, and everyone yells, gab. Yeah. Well, that's what a lot of processes used to teach is, right? Build value, feature, benefit, emotion, and it's you talking a lot. Well, I don't know about you, Heidi, but you know what I have never said walking into a sales environment outside? Like, I've never looked at my wife and said, boy, I hope we get a salesperson that can't shut the heck up. That'd be amazing. I've never thought that ever in my entire life.
Yes. Yes.
So confidence and knowledge and knowing where you're going is a part of the puzzle, but knowing how to extract that buyer's story and get them to tell you about what problem do I need to help them solve, not what do you need to sell them. You see, the myth here is that we think we're selling homes, and I just tell people that is not what you're selling. You're selling life improvement, and the minute you figure that out, now the people over process part, oh, that changes everything, because now you're actually a problem finder, not a problem solver.
That's huge.
Huge.
You're the savior of their situation.
Well, that's it. And I would even tell people that if I was in a master plan community today and someone walked in and they looked like they'd gotten, blasted with commission breath everywhere they went, I would look at them and I'd say, have you guys been to like all of the folks around here? And they'll be like, like, you can tell. And then I would literally say, well, on behalf of all of them, I apologize. How about we do it differently? How about instead of me making this about me and what I'm selling and trying to get you to buy something, what if I just kind of forget the sales process for a second and we just talk like human beings and I just find out if there's a way I can serve you guys? You know what buyers are going to say to that?
Please.
Thank you. Right?
Please, we're glad we came.
Yeah. And then you'll hear things like, you were so different. You actually cared. You actually listened to us. You actually asked us questions no one else asked. That's what's going to happen.
Just simply having that listening skill that is so rare, not just with sales, but with anybody. A listening skill is so rare anymore, and it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. But again, it's what's happening.
One question, then won't they walk in with the dumbest first question? What are your incentives?
Yeah, that's going to happen. And it's happened because we've trained them to do it. Every other builder, you're walking in and they're saying, hey, just want to let you know we're doing a 3, 2, 1 buy down today. What's up? Like, that's what's happening.
Right.
That's so when you have that, this could be a lengthy conversation. I'll make it this quick, is that you have to understand that if you get into an incentive conversation with somebody, that you're not going to win that. And the reason I say you're not going to win that is because people buy emotionally. So you've got to figure out what the emotional side of it is, because a price conversation without a value conversation, which is what problem are you solving, is a conversation that's on logic. And all of the studies would show you, in fact, this is kind of a fun one. I wrote about this in StoryGetter, is that you have a study that was done that showed that people put in a purchase decision moment when they looked at the fMRI brain activity. 85% of the activity was in the emotion center of the brain. We all know that. That's not new. But what I like is there was another study, and I think it was done by a guy named Damasio, an Italian neuroscientist, and he duplicated that same study, but his test subjects were people that all had brain damage. And the specific brain damage they had was the emotion center of their brain did not work. It was broken. They could not show emotion, could not get emotional. It was gone. And when he put them into a point of decision making of a purchase, here's what they found out. Not one person could make a decision.
They just couldn't make a decision without that
They couldn't
part.
do it. That tells you how important the emotion center actually is. So if you get into a conversation around incentives and numbers, it's not that they don't matter, but you better figure out what is the emotion part, because there's an old Warren Buffett quote, probably sacrilegious to talk about it anymore, but he says this: price is what you pay, value is what you get. Okay, so if that's true, you can't really have a pricing conversation without a adjoining value conversation, and they get to determine the majority of the value. The problem you're solving, does your offering solve my problem? Well, that's way more valuable to me than anything else. So how can I justify that this price is worth it if I don't know the solution that you're providing? So this is the idea. The idea is you got to figure out how to make sure you get into that conversation around value pretty quick, right? That if they say, well, what are your incentives? I'm not one for hiding them. You might have them on a banner outside on your trap fence, or you might have them advertised on your website. That's great, but you better follow that up with some form of, all right, well, that's what we're doing. But before we get into any of that, I'm just interested, like, what's your story? Like, what problem are you solving? What's going on that has you guys looking? Like, what's happening? And if you get that story, it gives them an idea of, is this worth it? Because there's an old thing that I had a sales partner used to say, and I think it was done rudely, but there was truth in it. She used to say this: are you buying an incentive or are you buying a home? Right? She used to say that. It was sort of a punch in the face, but there's truth in it. And then the other thing people would say is there's no such thing as a good incentive on a home you don't really care about or don't love, right? And that there's truth to that too. So you've got to get to that value side of it. So yes, and knowing how to do those things and training on how to do those things is absolutely important. But if you don't do them with empathy and curiosity, you're probably not going to get as far. People over process.
It's your punch list of questions instead of your actual curiosity.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely correct. You show me someone with genuine curiosity and genuine empathy, and I will show you someone who's going to get further with people than someone who doesn't have those things.
We all know those people, like your wife, those people in our lives that you say, oh, they could sell ice to an Eskimo. We have those people in our lives, and I think that when you look at that, that's one of the things that they have. Is it isn't necessarily charisma, it's just that they're curious, and they can listen to any conversation.
Did you ever used to watch Columbo?
No, I know what it is, and I know, but I haven't watched Columbo.
So for those of the audience that don't know Columbo, Peter Falk was the actor. My dad was friends with him, and Peter Falk played this character who was kind of like he seemed sort of like he wasn't really terribly smart, but what he was extremely curious. And he'd always say, just one more question, ma'am, just one more question. I'm so sorry, one more question. This was his famous line, one more question. And the more questions he asked, the more he was able to solve the case. I feel like that's what we should be doing, right?
Yeah.
And your questions have to be better than how many bedrooms are you looking for and what's your time frame, and are you pre-qualified? Like that. I mean, I got asked this question the other day, Heidi, which is, do you think salespeople are going to be necessary in new home sales in the future with all the tech and AI and all that stuff? I'm sure you hear this question.
I hear this question a lot. Yeah. And I'm sure I have the same answer as you.
Well, my answer is it depends. It depends. How are you just sharing information, and promoting an incentive, if that's what you're doing, I don't need you right now. I can put an iPad on a stand that asks how many bedrooms, and they select one, and what's your
Yeah.
price range, and have you been pre-qualified. I can do that right now, and then it'll say, go look at the second model on the left, and then here's a QR code for the floor plan and price sheet. I don't need you right now for that. Today, I can get rid of my sales staff if that's our
No.
approach.
Right, if that's your approach, right.
But if you're curious and you put people over process and you lean into the soft skills and you learn how to communicate, well, I think there's a need for that always, 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 always.
I think the need for that will become more and more as
Well,
we
that's right.
we have more technology. You know, we're leaning a little bit on more technology. It's going to be more important to have that, to be able to make those personal connections when people aren't getting those personal connections in other parts of their life.
I think there's a pendulum swing, right? Where the pendulum swing goes so far to the technology side, and we get all excited. We're like, oh my gosh, ChatGPT, and those are great, and I'm all for those things. But they will not override the need for connection from other people. They just won't.
I think it'll not only not override it, but it'll make it more important in our entire life. So I think that's.
I just got a text message from Abby Murata. I don't know if you know Abby. She said, I love Columbo.
I love, you know.
Well, thank you, Abby, for pointing that out, because I wasn't sure if the audience was going to get that reference. So thank you.
Susan Starbuck says, I just want to say hi to Ryan. It's been a minute since we spoke. Love this information. Earlier on, she did say that she did work with Glenda, and
Yes.
you know, she was so missed. And Susan's put some great information in here. We haven't been able to squeeze all of her comments in, but yeah, I thought that was nice. Lindsay says she's more of a Matlock girl. I think it's Matlock that has the new Kathy Bates version. There's a new Kathy Bates it's either Columbo or Matlock. I think it was Matlock.
It's probably Matlock is my guess.
Yeah.
Well, too fun. So glad to hear some, gosh, Susan, I haven't talked to Susan in a while.
I love that. Columbo was always the summary close. Awesome.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone should go watch Columbo.
Do we have any other questions out there? Anyone that has a question, comment for Ryan before we kind of wrap things up? Type it out, pop it in.
Bueller. A little bit of movie trivia. We'll see how good you are here, Heidi. What was Ferris Bueller's best friend's name in Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Cameron.
Last name?
Oh gosh, you got me.
Think of the back of his jersey. He had a hockey jersey on with the name on it.
Oh.
And the teacher said it as well, right after he said Bueller. He did this like two more names and then this guy's name. Does anybody know? In the chat box, does anybody know? I can't read the chat, but does anybody? Yes.
Yes, Jeff Johnsrud got Cameron Fry. I wouldn't have gotten that.
All right.
I like to think of myself as a child of the 80s. I know all of these things, but you got me good.
What was the girlfriend's name?
Simone?
Right. No, you're close.
No, it was. Yeah, somebody else said Simone too. Sloan.
Sloan is correct.
Got Sloan. That's
good job,
right.
Randy. What was her last name? Let's see how good you all are.
Nope.
Think of when Cameron had to call the school to get her out of class. And then the secretary gal says, I have Mr. blah 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 on line 1, and then Ed Rooney's like, I want my daughter out in front. Anybody?
I don't remember that. Anybody? Sloan's last name? Peterson?
You got it. That's it.
Hello, I'm Mr. Peterson.
I want my daughter. Anyway.
On that note, I always love having you on, Ryan, because you make these so much fun and you bring good information too. That's the main point of this, right? And you bring valuable information, and we always have so much fun doing it. So thank you very much for being a part of this today. For all of you on here, We're going to send you the recording. I know you're going to want to watch it again and send it to friends, and reach out to Ryan if you have questions about anything that you heard today. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Questions or comments, feedback, any of that. You will get a little survey from us too. Fill that out, because that's how we choose our next webinar. And we get information from you, is how, we use that as guidance. So please fill out that survey, and we'll have more people like Ryan on that can give, well, there's no one like Ryan, but that can give some good information. So thanks again for being with us, and we will see you again soon. Thanks,
Thanks,
Ryan.
thank
See
you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.